Hey everyone, Privya here, third year medical student, and today I'm going to be redoing my desk setup. And I thought in the meantime, while I'm doing this, I can explain to all of you how I've so far gotten most of the research positions that I've wanted to. I get this question so much. I do talk about research off and on this channel because it's a part of my life. Not so much this year, but definitely my first 2 years in medicine and prior to starting medicine. And since I get so many questions about it, I thought I would actually make a video on how to do that. Don't mind me right now, I'm in my sweats. It was minus 45 this morning here in Prince George, and currently, yeah, not too bad, minus 29. It feels like minus 37, so a little bit warmer now. So I'm just like, I was cold outside, so I'm really cozy right now in my sweatpants and my slippers, just hanging out at home. So I actually have to apparently take this monitor apart. I started doing research when I was in undergrad. I think it was the summer after first year. I hope I don't break this thing. I did my undergraduate degree in Kingston, Ontario. I grew up in BC. So in the summer after first year, I came back to British Columbia. And I thought it would be a good idea to get some research under my belt. I've never done research before, so I didn't really know how to get a research position. So I applied for a position at Science World, it's kind of like a science center for kids mainly, but the lab was looking for a volunteer who could work there without being paid. Since I had no experience, I thought that volunteering was the best thing to do, and that was a good building block for me. I started to learn about research. I also learned how to talk to kids, something that I wasn't very good at. So I got to interact with children, and then most importantly, I got to interact with their parents. As an 18-year-old, I was approaching parents at this science center, and that really built my confidence. I was able to approach people and confidently talk to them and explain to them what we were doing. So that was a really good foundational experience for me. The next time I was going to do research was in my second year of university. I found a professor who was doing some research in reproductive anatomy. And in my second year, I sent them an email, attached my CV, and asked if I could volunteer in the lab. I asked to volunteer because I didn't have that much experience, and I didn't actually think that my skills warranted being paid at that time. And this is a little side note. I'm sure a lot of you don't actually agree with this, especially right now. There's so much out there in the media about how we shouldn't be interns and how interns aren't paid enough and free work is not ethical and young people need to make a living, and too many people who leave university have these intern jobs that are very low paying and they can't support themselves. And I do agree with that. But one of the reasons that I believe people don't have a good job out of university is because they don't spend their university years, which are the most formative in my opinion, getting that experience that they need. You can't expect to leave university and have a good paying job if you don't spend that time learning and climbing your way up. So another thing about volunteering is that there's always going to be someone who will take that job for free. Of course, this comes from a very privileged place. Not everyone has the luxury to volunteer. I was in school with a full course load, and then I was volunteering on top of that. But I could only do that because my education was paid for by a scholarship that I got when I left high school. I completely understand that there's some people who, on top of their full course load, have to work to support themselves through university. And obviously, this doesn't apply in that position. But for me, I was fortunate that I didn't have to work. And then with that free time, I was able to volunteer. So that is one caveat to this that I am completely aware of. This is not something that is an oversight on my part. Okay, let's Google how to take the stand off of this computer screen. And it definitely sounded like something broke. Okay, so about volunteering your time. Yeah, so what I decided to do was to ask to volunteer. If medicine is something that you want to go into, then this is something that you have to get used to. If you don't want to volunteer, if you don't want to give your time without receiving something tangible back, or if experience and mentorship is not what you want in exchange for your time, then medicine is going to be a difficult route for you, because that is essentially medicine in a nutshell. You spend your clerkship and elective years putting in over 80 hours in a hospital, and all you're getting back is sometimes good mentorship, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes people don't treat you well, and if you want something back for your time, this isn't the place for you, actually, because it's gonna be draining. You're going to get burnt out. There are easier ways to make money than being in medicine. Even residency, the amount that you get paid is probably close to minimum wage for the amount of time that you're putting in. If medicine is your goal and if you want to do research to get there, I really recommend starting off your foundation by volunteering in a lab. And that's the only reason I got to where I was. Back to the timeline. I was in second year university, second semester. I found a lab that I wanted to be in, and I emailed that professor. I asked him if I can work for him, and I got a response back. And essentially he said that my lab is currently full. So here's an example. I was asking to volunteer. I wasn't even asking for him to pay me, and he didn't want to take me on. I couldn't say anything. I accepted it, and that was fine. Fast forward about 2 months, I went to this person's office, and I introduced myself. I knocked on his door. I said that I'm Privia. I emailed you a few months ago about a research position. This is a pro tip for you. It's a lot harder to reject someone in person. I ended up working with him for the rest of second year, throughout the summer of second year, and then I worked with him throughout all of third year as well. And because I had formed that connection with him, he allowed me to do my thesis project with him in fourth year. If it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't consider the master's that I did. I probably wouldn't be here today in med school if it wasn't for the supervisor that I had in university. With that, I was able to write a paper. I was able to present, I think it was two poster presentations, and it gave me a really good building block in terms of moving forward after my undergrad. So after undergrad, I wanted to leave Ontario and try to come as far west as I could. I thought the best way to do this was through research, and I wanted to do a research in something that I enjoyed. How I did this is the important thing, and since this point, right after undergrad, I've been utilizing this method for every single research opportunity that I've not only sought out, but that I've ended up getting. Basically, any research position I want, I have had the opportunity to go ahead and do research there. So number one is finding your area of interest. This, I would say, goes hand in hand with number two, which is geographical location. If you are really set on a location, for instance, if you have family somewhere, if you have a home there, if you can't travel somewhere else for any reason, then obviously you're limited to a certain area. The second issue is what you actually want to be researching. If you just want to do any type of research, get the experience or publish or whatever you want to do, the options are really endless, and then it depends on what city you want to move to. I went to different websites for programs at the university. I went to, for example, U of C's cardiology website. I went to U of A's cardiology website. I went to each school's neurology website, and so on and so forth. And if I found a supervisor or a physician who was doing research that I found interesting, then that was an option for me. I spent a lot of time doing this, and what ended up happening was I made an Excel spreadsheet of all of the opportunities that I found interesting, and then I ranked them. And there were a few things that went into this. I've talked about location, I've talked about area of interest. Another thing that was really important to me was publishing and getting real research experience. Being productive is something that I value, and a part of productivity for me is having goals and then seeing the outcome of my work. And publishing is a way to do that. When I was looking at clinical researchers, I found that they published a lot more often than the basic science researchers. This obviously isn't a steadfast rule, but at least for the ones that I was looking at. I searched the researcher that was of interest to me. I scrolled through their publications and I would see how often they published in every year. And if I found an area of interest that seemed to be a good fit for me, but that researcher wasn't publishing very often, I knew that my chances of publishing there were not very high. So that basically set that opportunity lower down on my list of priorities in terms of what I wanted to be doing. And this is kind of how I ranked these. I found the province that I wanted to be in, I found an area of interest, I found the type of research that I wanted to do, which was clinical research. I found supervisors who were publishing often enough that I was able to go in and hopefully publish, and then I emailed them. And this is where this list came in, because I didn't want to send out a mass email to 50 people, for instance. That's not the way to get any research opportunity. That's not the way to get a job or anything really. Mass emails that aren't personalized don't work in my opinion. And I wanted to show that I was applying to this specific opportunity for a reason. And I think that's one of the ways that I have been successful in getting most of the research positions. So how did I do this? I would look up their publications, what type of research they did, and then I would always mention that in the email. I would talk about who I am, why I wanted to work with them, and then one of the most important things, in my opinion, is what I can do for them. I feel that a lot of people miss out on this point, and everything is that I want to work for you for this reason, I want to gain this knowledge from you, I want to publish with you, but what they forget is you always can provide some sort of value to someone else. And if you don't show how you're valuable, then why would someone want you to work with them? And by showing how I could be an asset to their lab, I think that it showed that not only was I interested, but I was really invested in it and I wanted to work with them. And that was actually the case. That's what I wanted to do. And by making that come across in your email, I think you have a better chance at someone offering you a position. Another thing that I did was that I always attached my CV to the initial email that I sent them. Sometimes I've heard that people will reach out to someone and say, if you're interested, I will send you my CV. Honestly, the people who you're contacting are really busy. They may not have time to read your email, let alone respond back to say that they want your CV, for instance. Give them all the information, and if you feel confident enough in your CV, that's even more of a reason that you should put it there. You want to give them every reason to open it up, you want to impress them, and you want them to offer you a position. So always create the least amount of work for the person who you're emailing. Give all your information right there. Another important part of this is funding. I mentioned before that I think volunteering is very important. Giving your time for free in order to gain something other than a monetary value for the time that you're putting in. Mentorship, research experience, all of that. At this point in my life, I had finished undergrad and I didn't really want to be working for free at this point because I was not in school, I had to pay for my rent, I was living in a new city, all of those things. And I had put in that time already to build that foundation. The difficult thing though is that I was emailing people who I didn't know. It's much more likely for someone to pay you or to hire you for a job if you know them or have some sort of connection with them, which I did not with any of the people who I was contacting. But what I did have is that I had funding available to me. So as I mentioned, one of the reasons why I didn't have to work during undergrad is because I had a scholarship that allowed me to essentially pay for my education out of high school. A part of that scholarship was that I had some money available to me for summer internships. So for this summer, I had the opportunity to use some funding from the scholarship and take it with me and work for a university. So that's what I did. I told the supervisor right off the bat, this is who I am, this is why I want to work for you, this is what I can provide to you, and I come with funding. So essentially, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to come to you with money, you don't have to pay me. So who can turn that down? If I were you, try to apply to any scholarship that you can. Whatever you're going into, whatever area piques your interest, there's usually some sort of funding. Just Google it. There's so many opportunities out there. Even if it's $1,000 a month or whatever the amount is, it'll help you get your foot in the door if you say you come with a little bit of funding. For me, that's what I did. And I worked fully funded for a summer. It wasn't a lot of money. It was basically minimum wage. But then when my summer ended, that's kind of like a probation period. I was able to show my supervisor that I'm a good worker. I'm valuable here. And if I stay here, you don't have to worry about training someone else. I'm familiar with how you work. I'm familiar with research. And that's how I ended up working for another 1.5 to 2 years out in Calgary. After my summer, my supervisor hired me on with his own money and his own funding, and welcomed me into his team. How do you find these positions? I get this question a lot. One way is to apply to the opportunities that are open, whether this is through a university, through research organizations like the BC CDC, the BC Cancer Centre. Obviously these are BC specific because I'm more familiar with those. So many people apply to those opportunities. Anytime you're applying for a job, if there's an open application, people will be applying to it. What I did was every single research opportunity that I applied for, I emailed the professor directly. There was no research opening. I didn't know how big the team was. I didn't know if they had the capacity to take someone on, but I emailed each supervisor directly. Basically, modern times version of a cold call. So I do this because I'm not fighting for a position while other people are fighting for it. Also, a supervisor is much more likely to offer you a position if you have their full attention. And I really believe that if you send them an email when no one else is, and if they don't have an opening posted, you're going to have their full attention when they read your email. And you're not sifting through hundreds of emails about the same thing. There's just one. You're much more likely to stand out if there is essentially one applicant, which will be you. So that's what I did, and that has so far been successful for me. Not only did I do this after undergrad, but once I got into med school, I did the exact same thing. I emailed someone who had published in areas that intrigued me, and I sent them an email. There was no job application open. I explained who I was, where I was in my life, a little bit about my past experience, why I wanted to work with them, and what I could offer them. And then of course, I attached my CV to the end of the email. And don't be afraid to email anyone. Sometimes what I did, and actually in Vancouver, I emailed department heads, I emailed research directors. Don't be afraid to email important people. At the end of the day, if you want to work for an organization, the higher up the person, they're probably going to be making most of the decisions. And what happened when I was in medical school was that I emailed the director of a program. They didn't have any opportunities specifically, but they passed along my CV to someone who they knew could use an extra hand. And that's how I got my position. This also works internationally. So during the summer after first year, I spent a month at Johns Hopkins, and I got that position, of course, the exact same way. So I've heard good things about Baltimore. It's a completely different city from anywhere where I've lived. Obviously the school is very well known, and they have a huge research program there. A lot of funding goes there, and I thought that would be a really great life experience, which I could combine into a good research experience. So same steps. I knew the city now that I wanted to apply to. I knew the school. I knew I wanted to do clinical research. I searched up opportunities or researchers in addictions, in alcohol use, mental health, those types of areas, and ended up finding a psychiatry position. And I guess I should rephrase that. It actually wasn't a position. It was just someone doing research in an area that I felt was interesting. And the last step before emailing them was to search up this supervisor on PubMed and see what type of research they were publishing and how often they were publishing. And what I found was that there were a few people who weren't publishing as much, and then there were a few people who were publishing quite often through the year. And that was a good deciding factor for me on how to pick between those two people. So I emailed someone, same information in the email that I won't bore you with again. I feel like reiterating it because it's so important, but I'll save you from that. At the end of the day, I do want you to keep watching these videos. They liked what they saw, I liked their response, and then I chatted with the person over the phone or Skype, I can't remember now, and it ended up working out. And this just goes to show that the best way to get anything, this goes beyond research actually, this is very important in life in general, is to just put yourself out there. Don't worry about what other people think. Some of you who've messaged me have talked about being a little bit shy to email someone you don't know, not having positions that are available, not wanting to seem like you're annoying someone. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter at all what other people think. If I email someone and I'm annoying them, most likely they're not going to respond back. So then I think, are they not responding back because I'm annoying them? Or are they not responding back because they're busy and don't have any opportunities and don't have time to let me know? Well, whatever the situation is, I just think about it as the latter, and then I move on to the next person. If you are so worried about what other people think or about bothering people, it's going to be really hard to get anywhere, because the only way you make those connections and the only way you network is by putting yourself out there and ultimately showing people who you are. Now that I've ranted a little bit for however long that ended up being, I hope you have a little bit more insight into how I get all of the research positions that I get. Show people not only why you want to work with them, but show them what you can offer. Never forget that you are never just a cog in the system. You're never less valuable than anyone else. And even if you don't have any research experience right now, just remember that whoever you're working with, anyone who you look up, they all started at the same place as you. And more often than not, people are willing to give back. Luckily, everyone who I've contacted so far, everyone who I've done research with, they've provided mentorship to me in so many different ways. They've written me reference letters, they've taught me how to navigate through research, through the politics of submitting to journals. I can't underscore enough how important it is to contact people and get your foot in the door. And in my opinion, that's the only way to get anywhere in life. All right, that's basically all I have for today. I hope that wasn't too boring for you. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message, comment below. If you're wondering about research, go ahead and bounce some ideas off of me. I hope you found that a little bit useful. I hope you enjoyed, well, you probably didn't really enjoy me setting up my desk, but I mean, I'm quite happy with the finished product. And as always, I will see you in the next one.